My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a pediatric nurse at Brookside Medical Center. And the last place I ever thought I'd be banned from was church, especially by my own mother. It happened on a Sunday morning that smelled like lemon polish and old hymn books. The kind of Sunday where the light filters through stained glass and makes everyone look softer than they really are. I was standing in the foyer of New Grace Fellowship, adjusting the cuff of my cream blazer when my mom stepped in front of me. She didn't hug me. She didn't smile. She didn't even lower her voice. "You are not coming in there," she said. Just like that. I thought she was joking, or stressed, or maybe upset about something I didn't know yet. But then she added, "You've embarrassed this family enough." And that's when the air changed. People were walking past us. Mrs. Hargrove from the choir, the Wilson twins, Deacon Price. They slowed down just enough to hear tone without hearing words. Church people are good at that. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Her mouth tightened the way it always did when she felt powerful. "You know exactly what I'm talking about." I didn't. That was the problem. "I will not have you parading your shame in front of Pastor Reynolds." That name hit like a dropped glass. Because I respected Pastor Reynolds. I'd grown up under his sermons. He baptized me when I was 16. He prayed over me when I got into nursing school. And now apparently I was a disgrace. "I don't understand," I said quietly. "You don't need to. You just need to leave." She stepped aside so people could pass. But she didn't move enough for me to walk through those sanctuary doors. And I realized something in that moment. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned, which meant something had been said. Something had been told. Something about me. And I didn't know what it was. That was curiosity loop number 1. The second one came 10 minutes later. Because as I turned to leave, humiliated, confused, my ears ringing, I caught a glimpse through the open sanctuary doors. Pastor Reynolds was standing at the pulpit, looking directly at me. Not angry, not shocked, concerned, like he knew something I didn't. That look would haunt me for weeks. But the third loop, the one that kept me awake at night, came later that afternoon. When my younger sister Ava texted me, "Why did you lie?" That was it. No context, no explanation, just those 4 words. And I stared at my phone thinking, lie about what? Let me be clear, I am not perfect. I've made mistakes. I've dated the wrong men. I've said things in anger. I've walked away from conversations I should have stayed in. But I don't lie about things that destroy families. And the way my mother said shame, it wasn't casual. It was surgical. She wanted me erased. If you've ever had someone rewrite your character in a room you weren't in, you know the feeling. It's not just betrayal, it's displacement. You begin questioning your own timeline. What did I miss? Who did she talk to? How long has this been building? Because my mother doesn't explode, she curates. Her name is Denise Carter, and reputation is her religion. Church wasn't just faith for her, it was status, position, visibility. She chaired the Women's Outreach Committee, organized the annual retreat, led prayer circles that somehow always centered back on her testimony. So for her to ban me publicly, that meant she believed I threatened something bigger than pride. Or maybe she was protecting something. That possibility didn't occur to me until much later. That's the twist I promised you. But that Sunday, I went home and sat on my couch in silence. No TV, no music. Just the hum of my refrigerator and the echo of her voice. "You've embarrassed this family enough." I tried calling her around 3 p.m. Straight to voicemail. I tried Ava. She declined. By 6 p.m., 3 church members had unfollowed me on social media. By 9 p.m., a woman from Bible study messaged me, "Praying for your repentance." Repentance. For what? And here's the part that makes this even worse. 2 weeks before this happened, I had told my mom something in confidence, something vulnerable, something that required trust. And if she twisted that, if she weaponized that, I didn't know how I would survive it. But I still didn't know. And that's what broke me. Because being accused without knowing the charge? That's psychological warfare. I didn't cry that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, repeating the phrase that would carry me through everything that came next. Truth doesn't panic. I didn't understand it fully then, but I held on to it. Truth doesn't panic. Because lies need urgency. Lies need crowd reaction. Lies need volume. Truth can wait. What I didn't know was that the following Sunday, the entire church would be waiting too. And what happened on that stage would change everything I thought I knew about my mother. When people ask me what my childhood was like, I usually pause before answering. Because on paper, it looked ideal. 2-parent household, suburban neighborhood, Sunday school every week. Family dinners at 6:30 sharp. But what I learned early, long before I had language for it, is that love in our house was conditional. Not loud, not violent, just conditional. My mother, Denise Carter, believed in presentation, in control, in keeping the story straight before anyone could question it. And in our house, I was the unstable variable. Ava, my younger sister, was easy, soft-spoken, naturally obedient, the kind of child who colored inside the lines without being told to. I, on the other hand, asked questions. Why can't we skip church one Sunday? Why does everything have to be perfect when company comes? Why do you talk about forgiveness at church but not at home? That last one earned me 3 days of silence when I was 13. Silence was my mother's favorite punishment. Not yelling, not grounding. Withdrawal. I remember one specific Sunday when I was 9. I'd spilled grape juice on my white tights 10 minutes before service. Completely accidental. My hands were small. The cup was too full. My mom didn't shout. She knelt down, grabbed my chin, and said quietly, "Do you understand how this makes me look? Not how it makes you feel. Not whether you're okay. How it makes me look." That sentence shaped something inside me. I started monitoring myself constantly, my posture, my tone, my reactions. Because mistakes weren't mistakes, they were threats. By the time I was 16, I had 2 identities. Church Naomi, composed, helpful, volunteering in the nursery. Home Naomi, careful, analyzing the emotional temperature of every room. My dad tried to buffer things when he could, but he traveled a lot for work, and when he was home, he avoided conflict. "Just let your mom cool down," he'd say. Cooling down sometimes lasted weeks. I remember my high school graduation vividly. I had worked hard, top 10%, academic scholarship offers. After the ceremony, my mother hugged Ava longer than she hugged me, because Ava had just won a regional art award that week. "You both did well," Mom said, "but Ava's creativity really shines." That was the first time I felt something sharp and unfamiliar. Not jealousy, but invisibility. And here's the part that's hard to admit. I started trying less. Not academically, but emotionally. If perfection was the only currency accepted and I couldn't be the golden child, then I would become self-sufficient, independent, untouchable. When I got into nursing school at 21, I moved out as soon as I could. Small apartment, second-hand couch, hand-me-down cookware. It was the freest I'd ever felt. My relationship with my mom improved slightly after I left. Distance made her kinder. Or maybe it just made her less threatened. She loved telling people, "My daughter is a nurse. She works with children." It sounded impressive, clean, reputable. But privately, She still corrected me. Don't wear that to church. Why are you still single? You're 32, Naomi. Time matters. Time, status, image. Those were her holy trinity. 2 weeks before she banned me, I made the mistake of being vulnerable. It was a Tuesday evening. I had just finished a 12-hour shift. One of my pediatric oncology patients had relapsed. 6 years old. Brave smile. Bald head wrapped in a Spider-Man scarf. I came home wrecked. And for some reason, maybe exhaustion lowers defenses, I called my mom. I told her I was struggling, that I was tired of carrying so much sadness, that sometimes I wondered if I'd chosen the wrong specialty. And then I said something softer. I feel alone a lot. There was a pause on the phone. Then she said, well, maybe if you settled down and stopped prioritizing your career, you wouldn't feel that way. I should have ended the call there. But I didn't. I said something else. Something she had never heard from me before. I've been seeing someone. Another pause. Who? His name is Daniel. Daniel wasn't dangerous. He wasn't married. He wasn't secretive. He was divorced. 38. Kind, thoughtful. Not from our church. Which, in my mother's world, was a complication. How long? She asked. A few months. And you didn't tell me? I wanted to be sure first. She exhaled slowly. Well, she said, you need to be careful. People talk. I remember feeling small again, like the girl with grape juice on her tights. But I didn't anticipate what came next. Over the next few days, she asked pointed questions. Was he financially stable? Why did his marriage end? Does Pastor Reynolds know him? Are you pure? That last question sat between us like a loaded object. I didn't answer it directly. I said, Mom, I'm 32. She responded, exactly. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Because looking back now, I realized something shifted in her voice that night. Not anger, calculation. And if you've ever grown up with someone who protects their image at all costs, you know that tone. It means adjustments are being made behind the scenes. It means narratives are being prepared. By the time that Sunday confrontation happened, the story had already been told. I just hadn't heard it yet. And the first hint of what she said would reach me in the worst possible way. Through a voice message I wasn't meant to hear. The voice message came Thursday night. I almost didn't open it. It was from Claire Benson, one of the women in my old Bible study group. We'd never been close, but we'd shared enough casseroles and prayer circles to feel familiar. The message was clearly forwarded by accident. There was a brief rustling sound. Then my mother's voice. Tight. Controlled. Carefully sorrowful. I didn't want to say anything, but I'm concerned about Naomi. She's living in sin, Claire, with a married man. I tried to counsel her privately, but she's become defiant. A pause. I'm afraid if she continues attending services, it sends the wrong message to the younger girls. Silence. Then Claire whispering, oh my goodness. The audio ended. I played it 3 times. Married man. Living in sin. Defiant. Each word felt like it had weight. Not dramatic weight. Heavy, slow weight. The kind that presses on your chest and doesn't move. Daniel was divorced. Fully. Legally divorced. I'd seen the paperwork when we talked about future plans. We weren't living together. And the most intimate parts of our relationship were no one's business. Especially not packaged like that. But the worst part wasn't the inaccuracy. It was the performance. The soft tremble in her voice. The concerned mother act. She wasn't attacking me openly. She was protecting the church. That's how reputations get dismantled quietly. I didn't cry right away. I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets. The tile was cold through my jeans. And I kept repeating the phrase I'd been holding on to since Sunday. Truth doesn't panic. But my body did. My hands were shaking. My stomach turned. Because now I understood something devastating. She hadn't banned me from church because she was embarrassed. She banned me because she'd already planted the lie, and my presence threatened it. I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said, warm as always. My voice sounded foreign when I spoke. "Did you ever tell anyone at your old church about us?" "No," he said immediately. "Why? Are you still legally divorced?" A pause. Not defensive, just confused. "Naomi, yes. Since 2018. You've seen the decree." "I know." I told him everything. The voicemail, the Sunday confrontation, the whispers. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that hurt more than anger would have. "Why would your mother say that?" I didn't have an answer. And that's when the fourth layer of the betrayal surfaced. This wasn't just about controlling me. It was about positioning herself. Because 3 days before that Sunday, the church board had announced nominations for assistant ministry director, a role my mother had been eyeing for years. Visibility, influence, platform. And what better way to demonstrate moral leadership than by publicly correcting your wayward daughter? If you've ever been sacrificed for someone else's promotion, you understand. It's not loud, it's strategic. I tried to call her that night. Voicemail. I texted, "Why are you telling people Daniel is married?" No response. An hour later, Ava texted, "You need to stop lying to everyone." My hands felt numb. "What lie?" I typed back. "That you're not living with him." I stared at the screen. We weren't. "Who told you that?" "Mom said she saw your car there overnight multiple times." That part was true. I had stayed over. But staying overnight is not living together. And Daniel was not married. But I could already see how this was being shaped. Overnight visits. Divorced man. Unmarried daughter. 32. In our church culture, that was enough. I drove to my parents' house that night. I don't know what I planned to say. I just knew silence would cement the narrative. When I rang the doorbell, my dad answered. His face looked older than I remembered. "Tough week?" he asked gently. "I need to talk to Mom." He hesitated. "She's not up for drama tonight." Drama. That word. Like I was staging something. "I heard the voicemail," I said quietly. His eyes flickered. He knew. "She's concerned about you," he said carefully. "No," I replied. "She's campaigning." That was the first time I'd said it out loud. And once I did, the pieces aligned. She wasn't protecting the church. She was protecting her candidacy. And I was collateral. Mom appeared behind him, arms crossed, composed. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "You told people Daniel is married." She didn't blink. "You've been spending nights at his house. That doesn't make him married. You're missing the point." "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "You are." We stood there in the doorway, neighbors' porch lights, glowing in the distance. "You've made this public," I continued. "You've told people I'm living in sin with a married man." She tilted her head slightly. I said I was concerned. "That's not what the voicemail says." That landed. Just slightly. Her eyes sharpened. "You were never supposed to hear that." There it was. Not denial. Not apology. Control disrupted. "Why?" I asked. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw something crack. Fear. But it wasn't fear of losing me. It was fear of losing position. "You don't understand what's at stake," she said quietly. "I understand perfectly," I replied. I left before she could say anything else. And that was the lowest point. Driving home, I felt something collapse inside me. Not my reputation, not my relationship, my belief that my mother would choose me over optics. If you've ever had that realization, You know it doesn't come with tears first. It comes with stillness, a quiet grief. That night, I sat in my car for 20 minutes before going inside. And for the first time since this started, I considered walking away from the church entirely. Not because I was guilty, but because fighting a lie inside a sanctuary feels like sacrilege. And I didn't know yet that the sanctuary was about to become a courtroom. I didn't go back to church the next Sunday, or the Sunday after that. At first, it was pride. Then, it became survival. Because once you know people are looking at you through a lens someone else polished, walking into that room feels like volunteering for trial. Instead, I watched the live stream. Laptop open, volume low, coffee untouched. I told myself it was temporary, that I just needed time. But time didn't soften anything, it sharpened it. The church group chat went quiet around me. Bible study invites stopped. The women who once sent prayer hands and heart emojis suddenly forgot I existed. Reputation doesn't disappear loudly. It fades through omission. Daniel tried to stay steady. He offered to go speak to Pastor Reynolds directly, to show documentation of his divorce, to clear the air. But something in me resisted. Not because I was ashamed, because I didn't want him dragged into a narrative he didn't create. This wasn't his fight, it was mine. And I kept hearing that phrase in my head. Truth doesn't panic. But I was tired of waiting for it to move. I tried one more time to reach my mom. I sent a long message. Calm, measured, no accusations. I know what you told people. It isn't accurate. If this is about your nomination, please don't use me. I love you. I'm not your enemy. She read it. No reply. That hurt more than if she'd argued. Silence again. Same strategy from childhood. Withdraw. Let the other person question themselves. Ava blocked me entirely. My dad started responding with one-word texts. It was like watching a controlled demolition of my identity. And the worst part? Part of me still wanted her approval. That's the piece no one talks about. Even at 32. Even with a career. Even financially independent. You still want your mother to say, I was wrong. If you've ever craved that from someone who can't give it, you understand the quiet humiliation of it. At work, I was steady, focused, competent. Children with IV lines don't care about church politics. Parents in crisis don't ask about your personal life. In those hospital rooms, I was grounded. But outside of them, the isolation crept in. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the voicemail, I ran into Mrs. Hargrove at the grocery store. She froze when she saw me. Naomi, she said carefully. Hi. There was a pause. Then the rehearsed sympathy. We're praying for you. For what? I asked gently. She shifted her weight. For restoration. Restoration. As if I had fallen. As if I had something to confess. I held her gaze. Daniel is divorced, I said calmly. We're not living together. And I haven't lied to anyone. Her face flickered. Confusion, then doubt. That was the first crack. Small, but real. Because lies need uniformity. The second someone hears a calm contradiction, the certainty trembles. That night, I made a decision. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just firm. I wasn't going to beg for entry anymore. I wasn't going to defend myself through whispers. If this was going to be corrected, it would be corrected publicly. But I needed timing, because barging into a service demanding clarity would only feed the narrative that I was unstable. So I waited. And during that waiting, something unexpected happened. Pastor Reynolds called. His voice was measured. Naomi, I'd like to meet. We met in his office on a Wednesday evening. Same room where he'd counseled couples, prayed over illnesses, helped families through funerals. He didn't waste time. I've heard concerns, he said. I assumed you had. Your mother expressed that you're involved with a married man. She's wrong. He studied me. Not skeptically. Carefully. Do you have proof of his divorce? I slid the scanned decree across the desk. He read it silently, nodded, then leaned back. Why would she say otherwise? There it was again. That question. I inhaled slowly. She's up for assistant ministry director. Understanding passed across his face. Not full comprehension, but alignment. I see. He didn't apologize. He didn't accuse her. He simply said, "There's more happening here than you realize." That sentence stayed with me, because I had assumed this was just about image. But his tone suggested layers, and layers meant history, which meant this wasn't the first time something had been curated. He ended the meeting with something simple. Give. This time. Time. Everyone kept telling me to wait. But waiting without direction feels like drowning slowly. Still, I left his office with something new. Not validation. Not victory. Possibility. And that possibility shifted something inside me. I stopped trying to chase my mother's version of events. I stopped explaining myself to every sideways glance. Instead, I focused on my life. Daniel and I had honest conversations. About pace, about boundaries, about what public scrutiny does to private intimacy. We chose not to rush anything. We chose steadiness. And in that steadiness, I felt strength forming. Not anger, not revenge, clarity. Because here's the truth. If someone builds a lie carefully enough, they forget one thing. Truth doesn't need volume. It needs light. And light was coming. I just didn't know from where yet. The church board vote was scheduled for the first Sunday of next month. And that morning, everything would shift. The month leading up to the board vote felt strangely calm. Not peaceful, just suspended. Like the air before a storm you can't see yet. I stopped watching the church live stream. Not out of bitterness, out of discipline. I needed to rebuild myself somewhere my mother's voice couldn't reach. And for me, that place was the hospital. Brookside Medical Center had always been demanding, but now I leaned into it. I volunteered for additional shifts in pediatric oncology. Not because I wanted to drown in work, but because I needed to remember who I actually was. In those rooms, no one cared about rumors. They cared about oxygen levels, white blood cell counts, whether their child would make it through the night. Perspective is clarifying. One Thursday afternoon, Dr. Hernandez pulled me aside after a difficult case. "You handled that beautifully," she said. It was simple praise, but it landed differently, because it wasn't tied to image. It wasn't conditional. It was about competence, about presence, about the kind of strength that doesn't perform. That same week, something unexpected happened. The hospital administrator announced an opening for pediatric care coordinator, a leadership role bridging nurses and physicians. It meant more responsibility, slightly less bedside time, more strategic planning. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have applied. I would have worried about being ready, about whether I looked the part. But something inside me had shifted. When you've already been publicly shamed for something you didn't do, fear of perception loses some power. So I applied. And during the interview, when they asked how I handle conflict, I didn't give a polished textbook answer. I said, "I stay calm long enough for the truth to surface." Dr. Hernandez smiled slightly. 2 weeks later, I got the position. It wasn't dramatic. No balloons, no applause. Just an email at 8:12 a.m. with the subject line, "Offer, letter." But I sat at my desk and stared at it for a full minute. Because this wasn't about promotion. It was about identity. I was not the girl standing in the church foyer being told to leave. I was a leader in a hospital that trusted my judgment. That distinction mattered. Daniel noticed the shift in me before I did. "You're steadier," he said one evening as we walked through Riverside Park. "How so?" "You're not trying to defend yourself in every sentence anymore." He was right. I'd stopped rehearsing explanations in my head, stopped imagining conversations where I convinced everyone of my innocence. There's a strange freedom in realizing you don't need to chase every lie. If you've ever reached that point, where silence feels stronger than rebuttal, you know what I mean. We slowed our relationship down intentionally, not out of shame, out of strategy. We stopped overnight visits, not because we were guilty, but because I refused to let optics fuel fiction. Daniel respected that, and that respect deepened something between us. Meanwhile, small cracks began appearing in my mother's narrative. Mrs. Hargrove texted me out of the blue one afternoon. "I heard Daniel is divorced. I may have misunderstood." No apology, but uncertainty. And uncertainty is where lies begin to collapse. Then Ava unblocked me. She didn't message. She just unblocked. Which told me something else was happening behind closed doors. Because my mother never retreats unless pressure builds. And pressure builds when multiple sources start asking the same question. Are we sure? 3 days before the church board vote, Pastor Reynolds called again. His tone was different this time, measured, but firm. "Will you attend service this Sunday?" My heart beat a little harder. "Am I allowed?" "Yes." A pause. "There may be clarification needed." Clarification. That word felt deliberate. "I'll be there," I said. After I hung up, I sat still. Because this was it. Not confrontation, not revenge, just alignment. And here's the part I didn't expect. The night before that Sunday, my mother called me. First time in over a month. I let it ring once before answering. "Hello?" Her voice was softer than usual. "Naomi." Just my name. No accusation attached. "Yes? I think it would be wise if you didn't attend tomorrow." There it was. Not a demand. A suggestion. "Why?" I asked calmly. "It could create confusion." "About what?" A long silence. Then, "Some matters are better handled privately." I almost laughed, because nothing about what she did was private. "You made it public," I said. "I didn't." Her breathing shifted slightly. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." And there it was. Not denial, not remorse. Pressure. Position. Image. "I understand exactly," I replied. Another pause. Then she said something that confirmed everything. "If you love this family, you'll stay home." I felt the old reflex rise, the little girl with grape juice on her tights, the one who didn't want to make her mother look bad. But I wasn't 9 anymore, and love doesn't require disappearance. "Truth doesn't panic," I said quietly. "What?" she asked. "Nothing, I'll see you tomorrow." I hung up before she could respond. That night I laid out my clothes carefully. Navy dress. Simple. Professional. No dramatic entrance. No anger. Just presence. Because this wasn't about humiliation. It was about alignment. And something in my chest told me tomorrow would not unfold the way she expected. Not because I planned to expose anything, but because someone else already knew more than I did. Sunday morning came bright and unseasonably warm. As I pulled into the church parking lot, I noticed something unusual. 2 additional board members standing near the entrance, talking in low voices, serious expressions. And through the glass doors, I saw Pastor Reynolds at the pulpit earlier than usual, waiting. The sanctuary doors opened, people turned, and for the first time in weeks, I walked in. The sanctuary felt smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just grown into myself. Conversations softened as I walked down the center aisle. Not dramatically, not theatrical, just subtle shifts. Heads tilting, eyes tracking. Whispers folding inward. I didn't rush. I didn't scan the room defensively. I simply walked. My navy dress fell just below my knees. My heels were quiet against the polished floor. I chose a seat halfway back. Not front row, not hiding. Balanced. Daniel wasn't with me. That was intentional. This wasn't about proving a relationship. It was about restoring my name. Across the aisle, Ava sat stiffly beside my mother. Mom didn't look at me immediately. She was speaking to one of the board members. Posture perfect. Hands folded in her lap. Composed. If you didn't know the backstory, you'd see a devoted church leader. That's the thing about curated reputations. They photograph well. The worship team began. 3 songs. Familiar lyrics. I sang softly. Not to perform spirituality, but because my faith was never the problem. Halfway through the second song, Ava glanced back at me. Our eyes met. Something flickered there. Not hostility. Uncertainty. That mattered. After the final hymn, Pastor Reynolds stepped forward. He looked different. Not anxious. Resolved. Before we move into today's message, he began, voice steady, there's something we need to address as a church family. The word address tightened the air. Mom's shoulders straightened slightly. I kept my face neutral. Truth doesn't panic, he continued. In recent weeks, concerns have circulated regarding a member of our congregation and alleged moral misconduct. The room was still. Specifically, that this individual has been involved with a married man and living in unrepentant sin. He paused deliberately, then said my name. Naomi Carter. There it was. Public. Clear. My heart thudded once, hard, then steadied. I didn't lower my head. I didn't shrink. I simply looked forward. Pastor Reynolds continued. These allegations were brought to leadership with urgency. As shepherds of this church, we take such matters seriously. A board member stepped up beside him, holding a folder. I personally reviewed documentation regarding Mr. Daniel Brooks's marital status. Daniel's full name echoed softly through the room. He has been legally divorced since 2018. A ripple moved through the congregation, small, but undeniable. Mom's jaw tightened. Pastor Reynolds didn't raise his voice. He didn't dramatize. He just laid it out. Additionally, there is no evidence that Naomi is cohabitating with Mr. Brooks. Another murmur. I could feel eyes shifting now. Not toward me in suspicion, toward my mother, because everyone knew who had carried the concern forward. He continued. In matters of reputation, Scripture calls us to truth, not assumption. The board member opened the folder. We have verified these facts independently. Silence pressed in. My mother finally turned her head slightly toward me. Our eyes met. For the first time in weeks, she looked unsure. Not guilty, not apologetic, just recalculating. And that's when Pastor Reynolds said something that changed everything. There are additional concerns that leadership has uncovered during this review process. The air shifted. Even I didn't know what that meant. He gestured toward the side aisle, and a woman I hadn't seen in over a year stood up. Her name was Lydia Marshall, former member, left quietly 18 months ago. At the time, the explanation had been vague. Personal reasons. She walked forward slowly, calm, controlled. I didn't intend to speak today, Lydia said into the microphone. But when I learned Naomi was being accused of something similar to what I experienced, I felt I had to. My stomach tightened. Similar? She looked toward my mother briefly, then back at the congregation. Last year, I was privately accused of inappropriate behavior with a married member of this church. Gasps. I was asked to step back from volunteer leadership while the matter was prayed over. Her voice remained steady. There was no evidence, no conversation with me first, just concern expressed to leadership. Concern, the same word. My chest felt hollow. Because this wasn't just about me. This was pattern. Lydia continued. The married man in question later admitted he had confided marital struggles to Mrs. Carter, who then interpreted our casual conversations as inappropriate. The room felt electric now. Not chaotic, but awake. Pastor Reynolds stepped closer. During our review regarding Naomi's situation, we revisited Lydia's departure. He paused and discovered significant inconsistencies. My mother's face had lost color. Not dramatically, just subtly drained. Because this wasn't a daughter defending herself. This was structure shifting. Lydia turned toward my mother directly. I lost friendships here, she said quietly. Because someone wanted to be seen as morally vigilant. The weight of that sentence settled across the sanctuary. Mom stood slowly, composed, but controlled. This is highly inappropriate, she said evenly. Personal grievances should not be aired publicly. Her voice still carried authority, still polished. But there was strain beneath it. Pastor Reynolds didn't argue. He simply replied, false accusations aired privately can be more damaging than truth, spoken publicly. That landed. Hard. Mom's eyes flickered around the room, scanning for allies. Some avoided her gaze, some looked stunned. Ava looked shaken. And I realized something profound in that moment. This wasn't about humiliating my mother. It was about breaking a cycle. Because when image becomes currency, people become expendable. And I had been expendable. Until now. The board member cleared his throat. There will be a formal review regarding how these allegations were handled. That word, review, carried consequence. Not dramatic expulsion, not spectacle, process. Which is far more devastating to someone who thrives on control. Mom inhaled slowly, then did something I didn't expect. She looked directly at me. Not with anger, not with apology, with something closer to recognition, as if she finally saw that I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't fighting. I was simply standing. Truth doesn't panic. And for the first time, neither did I. But this wasn't over. Because exposure is only the beginning, collapse comes next. The service didn't end with a benediction. It ended with a fracture. After Pastor Reynolds announced the formal review, he dismissed the congregation quietly. No music. No closing prayer circle. Just a calm, "You are free to go." But no one moved immediately. People stayed seated, processing. You could feel it. The collective recalibration. For years, my mother had been the standard, the vigilant one, the morally sharp one, the woman who protected the integrity of the church. And now integrity was looking back at her. I stayed seated. Not because I was frozen, because I refused to rush toward or away from anything. Truth doesn't panic. Mom didn't storm out. That would have broken character. Instead, she approached the stage slowly, speaking in low tones with two board members. Her posture was still upright, but her hands, I noticed, were clasped, tighter than usual. Ava remained in her seat, staring at the floor. After a few minutes, Pastor Reynolds stepped down from the platform and approached me. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I didn't do anything," I replied. "Exactly." There was weight in that word. He leaned slightly closer. "There are additional testimonies surfacing." "About Lydia?" I asked. "And others?" "Others." The pattern was wider than I knew. I exhaled slowly. Not in triumph. In realization. This wasn't a single accusation gone wrong. This was a system my mother had been quietly operating. Not to destroy people outright, but to position herself as necessary. Morally discerning. Indispensable. And once you build authority on suspicion, you need new suspicions to maintain it. That's how it works. Ava approached me hesitantly. "Naomi." Her voice was small. I turned toward her. "Yes?" She swallowed. I didn't know. I know. You should have told me. I tried. Her eyes filled slightly, but she didn't cry. I thought, Mom wouldn't lie about something like that. There it was. The sentence every child eventually confronts. I kept my tone even. Sometimes people convince themselves their version is truth. Ava nodded slowly. Then she said something that surprised me. She told me you were unstable. That word didn't sting the way it would have weeks ago. It clarified. Because I disagreed with her? I asked. She said you were making impulsive decisions, that you'd lost spiritual direction. Spiritual direction. It sounded clinical, almost compassionate. But it was framing, and framing is powerful. If someone can label you unstable, they don't have to disprove you. I felt a strange calm wash over me, because now I understood the full architecture. First, question character privately. Second, express concern publicly. Third, position yourself as protector. And if anyone resists, call them emotional. That formula works in churches, in workplaces, in families. If you've ever been labeled difficult for defending yourself, you know exactly what I mean. Across the room, my mother's voice rose slightly, not shouting, but firmer. This is being blown out of proportion. A board member responded quietly. Denise, multiple women have described similar experiences. Multiple. The word hung in the air. She turned then, and for the first time, our eyes met without an audience filter. No performance, no curated sorrow, just calculation unraveling. She walked toward me. Slowly. People parted without meaning to. When she stopped in front of me, her face was composed again. Are you satisfied? She asked softly. The question was sharp. Not angry. Strategic. As if my silence had orchestrated this. I didn't start this, I replied. You could have handled it privately. You didn't. A beat. She lowered her voice further. You don't understand leadership pressure. No, I said. I understand fear. That hit. Not dramatically, but precisely. Her jaw tightened. I was protecting this church. From what? She didn't answer. Because there wasn't an answer that didn't reveal the truth. Protection had never been the goal. Control was. And control slips when people compare notes. Behind her, Lydia was speaking quietly with another woman I vaguely recognized, someone who had stepped down from youth mentoring last year. I watched as their conversation grew more animated, more aligned. My mother followed my gaze, and something changed in her expression. Not rage, recognition. The narrative was collapsing, and she couldn't recalibrate fast enough. The board chairman approached. Denise, we'll need you to step back from all leadership duties pending review. Step back. Not expelled, not shamed. Structured consequence. Which, for someone like her, was worse. Her entire identity had been woven into visibility. Platform. Influence. To be removed from that, even temporarily, was disorienting. I have served this church for 20 years, she said evenly. And that service is acknowledged, he replied. But so is responsibility. Responsibility. Another word she hadn't anticipated hearing directed at her. The room had thinned now. People were leaving quietly. But the shift remained. Power had moved. Not loudly, not theatrically, just undeniably. Mom looked back at me once more. There was something new there. Not apology. Not hatred. Exposure. She saw that I wasn't afraid anymore. And fear had always been her leverage. Truth doesn't panic, I said softly. She stared at me, almost as if trying to decide whether to dismiss it. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. Not rushed, but smaller. And in that moment, I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. Because justice isn't about humiliation, it's about alignment. And alignment had begun, but consequences weren't finished unfolding. Because when a false narrative collapses, the vacuum it leaves demands explanation. And explanation demands admission. The review meeting was scheduled for Tuesday night. Closed door, board present, witness statements collected. And for the first time in my life, my mother would not control the room. The review meeting happened on a Tuesday night. I wasn't in the room. And that mattered. Because for once, the story about me was being discussed without me having to defend myself inside it. I got the call the following afternoon. Pastor Reynolds's voice was steady, but heavier than usual. The board has concluded its review. I sat in my office at Brookside, door closed, hands folded in my lap. And? I asked. There was a pattern, he said plainly, of framing concerns in a way that elevated suspicion without evidence. Multiple testimonies aligned. Aligned. That word again. Alignment is powerful. Your mother will be stepping down indefinitely from all leadership roles, he continued. She's been asked to participate in counseling before any future reinstatement is considered. No dramatic excommunication, no public shaming, just removal of platform, structure, accountability, the kind that doesn't trend on social media but actually changes systems. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. Not because she was punished, but because truth had been recorded formally, which meant it couldn't be rewritten later. After I hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I went back to my afternoon rounds. Room 214 had a 7-year-old named Micah, who was terrified of his next procedure. He needed someone calm, grounded, present. Life doesn't pause for personal vindication, and that's healthy. That evening, my dad called. He sounded older than usual. She's struggling, he said carefully. I'm sure she is. She feels misunderstood. I inhaled slowly. Dad, she accused me of something that wasn't true, publicly. I know. That surprised me. She's not a villain, he added softly. I never said she was. And that was the truth. My mother wasn't cartoon evil. She was deeply invested in being necessary. And when necessity becomes identity, fear drives behavior. Fear of losing influence. Fear of becoming irrelevant. Fear of not being admired. But fear doesn't excuse harm. That's the distinction. 3 days later, she asked to meet. Neutral location. A small cafe halfway between our homes. I agreed. Not because I owed her reconciliation, but because closure requires clarity. When I walked in, she was already seated. No makeup, no carefully pinned blazer, just a plain sweater and tired eyes. She looked smaller. Not far, she said finally. I know. That far, she said finally. I know. That startled her. You do? Yes. She frowned slightly. Then why didn't you stop it? There it was again. Responsibility deflected. I kept my tone steady. Because it wasn't mine to stop. She stared at the table. I was trying to protect the church. From what? Silence. Then something closer to honesty. I've seen what happens when leaders ignore moral drift. Daniel wasn't moral drift. I didn't trust him. That doesn't make him married. The words weren't sharp. They were surgical. She winced slightly. For a moment, I thought she might apologize. Instead, she said, "You've always challenged me." And there it was. The core. Not my behavior. My independence. You mistook independence for instability, I said. Her jaw tightened faintly. I raised you to be strong. You raised me to protect your image. The cafe hummed around us. Milk frothers. Distant conversation. Normal life continuing. She looked at me then. really looked at me. "You've changed," she said. "No," I replied quietly. "I stopped shrinking." That landed. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to soften the truth to protect her comfort. Because boundaries are not disrespect, they're clarity. "I love you," she said eventually. I believed her. Love and harm can coexist. That's the complexity no one prepares you for. "I love you too," I answered. "But loving you doesn't mean accepting false accusations." She nodded slowly. "I'll need time," she said. "So will I." We didn't resolve everything that day. There was no cinematic hug, no tears spilling over lattes. Just two women sitting across from each other. One learning she couldn't control the narrative anymore, the other learning she didn't need to. In the months that followed, things shifted gradually. My mother began counseling through the church's recommendation. Not because she was forced to, but because leadership reinstatement required it. Structured consequence, not revenge. Ava and I rebuilt slowly. She admitted she had believed our mom because mom always sounds certain. Certainty is persuasive, even when it's wrong. Daniel and I continued intentionally, not rushed, not hidden. And one quiet Sunday morning, 6 months after the exposure, I walked into church again. No tension, no whispers, just normalcy. Pastor Reynolds nodded at me from across the foyer. Lydia hugged me briefly. No spectacle, just restoration without performance. And my mother? She sat in the third row, not on stage, not organizing, just attending. When our eyes met, she didn't look away. There was no bitterness there, just awareness. Awareness that authority can be misused. That influence requires humility. That daughters grow up. After service, she approached me. "I'm learning," she said simply. "I can see that." That was enough. Not perfection, progress. If you've ever been misrepresented by someone who should have protected you, tell me what you would have done. Would you have walked away entirely, or stayed long enough for the truth to surface? Type karma if you believe the truth always comes out. But understand something. Truth doesn't move because of karma. It moves because someone stands still long enough not to panic. That phrase carried me through everything. Truth doesn't panic. And neither do women who finally know who they are. A year later, I was officially promoted to Senior Pediatric Care Coordinator. Daniel proposed quietly one evening in Riverside Park. No spectacle, just certainty. And on the day we married, my mother attended. Not as coordinator, not as overseer, just as my mom. She didn't give a speech. She didn't center herself. She simply hugged me and said, "I'm proud of you." It wasn't dramatic, but it was real, and sometimes real is enough. The last image I'll leave you with is this: a sanctuary filled with ordinary light. No spotlight, no accusation. Just stained glass reflecting colors onto wooden pews. And me sitting there, not defending, not performing, just present. Because the most powerful revenge isn't exposure, it's stability. And stability doesn't shout, it stands. Truth doesn't panic. And neither do I anymore. And before this video fades out, I want you to sit with one question. Who benefits when you stay silent? If this story reminded you that your voice matters, even when it shakes, even when it stands alone, then don't leave without doing one small thing. Subscribe, because these aren't just stories, they're reflections, they're reminders, they're proof that truth doesn't panic, and neither should you. Share this with someone who needs the courage to stop shrinking. And in the comments, finish this sentence. I stopped shrinking when I read every single one. Until the next story. Stand steady, stay grounded, And remember, the truth doesn't panic.